everybody! I am finally making a much requested video on how I make my seamless patterns in Procreate, so here we go! So the first step to making any pattern is to draw the elements that will be part of the pattern eventually. Now elements are that's just a fancy way of saying like the little drawings and shapes. So in my case for this pattern I'm going to be making some flower elements and some different shape elements, and I do this all on separate canvases. Something else I like to do that adds just a little bit of variety and fun to my patterns is I'll duplicate an element and then change the colors. So I have two versions of this flower in two separate color schemes. And what that does is it adds some balance to the pattern by having the shapes repeat, but it also adds some variety by having the same shape in some different colors. So your eye kind of doesn't know that it's looking at the same thing, but at the same time it does know that it's looking at the same thing. So it's just more fun and vibrant and exciting to look at. Of course, this is totally up to you and every pattern is different, so just have fun with it. Once I have all my elements ready to go for my pattern, the next step is to create a square canvas. That's very important that it is square, that I'm going to build my actual pattern on. I like to change the background color right away so I can see my pattern coming together. And then I can start to copy and paste my elements with a transparent background onto my new pattern canvas. As I'm doing this, I want to be really careful not to let any of the elements touch the edges of the canvas. We will do that later to make it a seamless pattern, but for right now we don't want any part of our elements to be cut off at the edges. So I can start arranging things as I go a little bit, but the most important for this first part is to just make sure that things don't get cut off. So if that means that they're overlapping each other a little bit at first, that's fine. When we copy and paste each individual element, it does show up as a different layer, so you don't have to worry about those kind of compromising each other. And the most important thing, as I said now, is just to make sure that they do not touch the edges of the canvas yet. As I add more elements, I can kind of start to arrange them and move them around, again, keeping them within the middle of the canvas, not on the edges, and knowing that I will have the chance to move them around again later if I want, but just starting to get an idea of what my pattern's gonna look like. Now for the magic trick of the seamless pattern, which is a little bit tedious, but the first step is to create a group with all of your elements. So that just looks like combining the top element to the next one and continuing to combine down and down and down until you have all of your elements combined in one group. Once all of your elements are together in one group, the next thing to do is to add a new layer still within that group. I usually do it at the top, and fill it completely with black or another dark color. Then you want to change the opacity of that layer to be, I don't know, around 50%. You want to be able to see that it's darker, but you still want to see your pattern underneath it. Once you do that, you want to just go ahead and duplicate that entire group. So now you'll have two versions of every piece of your element, every piece of your pattern, and two versions of that dark layer. Go ahead and select one of those groups. You just click on the thing that says new group, and making sure that your snapping and magnetics are both turned on, you can drag them halfway across your canvas, about halfway. It doesn't need to be exact because we're gonna match up the other side. You can see that I added that dark layer so that I can tell the difference between those two groups and those two versions of my pattern. So once I do one side, I just drag it off to the other, and the dark layer helps me make sure that I'm not overlapping either of my patterns even by a single pixel, because if it is overlapped or if I go too far even by 1 pixel, it's going to mess up the whole thing. So you can see how the dark layer really helps me to see and make sure that I'm matching this up perfectly. Once I've made sure that I've matched both sides up exactly, and this is pretty easy as long as you have the snapping and magnetics turned on, then I can delete those layers of black. And remember, now we have two separate groups. each with a different part of our pattern. So you can delete both of the black layers and then start to delete any empty layers that are there, and you can start to combine or merge together maybe some elements that got split in half. You can see some of those flowers on the side. They have been cut in half because it's going to be part of the seamless pattern and they happen to be on the edge. So just in case I want to move them around or something like that, I always like to merge them back together in one layer. If you have a lot of elements like me, this part can be a little challenging and a little tedious. One thing you can do is, you can see I was a little lazy, so all of mine just say inserted image, but when you're copying and pasting your elements, you can actually change the name of them, and that will make it a lot easier for you to merge them back together at a later point. This part isn't strictly necessary, but I do think it's really helpful, especially if you're like me and you like to change your mind and move things around a lot. Having all the elements on a separate layer helps you to do that without compromising any of the other elements in the pattern. If you want to be even lazier than me, which I do this sometimes, so no shame if you do, you can always flatten both of these groups and just merge it onto a single layer, and I'll show you more about how that works in a little bit. But if you want to be extra cautious, like I'm doing here, you can go ahead and really try to match up each element to its other half. Once this process is complete, I can combine the two groups together, so I have one big group again with all of my elements, and I can continue the process I started before of creating the pattern that I want within the middle of the canvas. Again, if there are any shapes that are touching the edges now, I just want to leave those be for the moment. I don't want to move or touch them, because if I move one side by accident and not the other, or if I move them the wrong way slightly, a part of that shape can get cut off and then my pattern's going to be all messed up. So for now, I just want to focus on the shapes that are already in the middle. I can also add some new elements. If you can see, I have some empty spaces in the middle of my pattern now, so I can fill those by adding new elements, duplicating ones I already have, or just by arranging and changing the sizes of the elements that are already in my pattern. But right now I'm really focusing on making sure everything is evenly spaced and that it looks nice from far away and from close up. As I go, I can see that everything is the way that I like it. Everything is evenly spaced and is looking like it's coming together nicely. But if you can tell from the top and bottom edges, I also still am going to have some empty spaces, which means I need to do that process again that we did before. Since everything's already in a new group, I don't need to do that part again. I just need to add that black layer at the top, change the opacity, and duplicate it once again. And then if you remember, I want to make sure that I have my magnetics and my snapping on, and I want to select one group and move it up or down depending on, I don't know, my feelings that day, the moon. And then again with the other group, I go ahead and select it, and using my snapping tool, move it exactly to match the other one. I can zoom in, make sure that there's not a lighter or darker line across, which would indicate that I'm off by a pixel or two. And once I'm sure that it's matching, I can delete those black layers and once again combine those groups and start to match up the elements with each other. I can see that I have some empty spaces in the middle again, so it's time once again to fill those spaces by either adding elements or moving them around, maybe adding some that I already have, duplicating them, and again making sure that I'm not touching those on either the side edges or the top and bottom edges, but I'm only working with things that are in the middle. And I like to do my little magic trick with the snapping tool and the black layer just one more time at the end. Usually there's kind of a weird little empty space in the middle edges one more time because it was maybe in the corners when I did it the first couple times, or I just missed something along the way. So I like to do this one last time also so that I can see the original pattern that I was working on, if it still works, or if I have too many of the same colors close together, too many of the same shapes close together, I can kind of rework the pattern by starting over from the beginning. Now here I got a little bit lazy and I didn't want to match all the shapes up, so I'm going to show you the lazy way to do it. Instead of matching everything up, I just combine the two groups and then flatten them. And what that does is turns all of the elements into a single layer, which makes it easy to not have to worry about matching everything, but it's a little trickier because I have to use my selection tool and be very careful not to touch any other elements if I still want to move something around. So this is another option, and you can turn magnetics and snapping off if you want to be more precise and natural about how you do those movements. Here's another reason why you might not choose to do this is if you see that little black mark, I didn't notice that until it was too late, but because everything is on a single layer, I couldn't just erase it because it would compromise the entire thing. So instead I had to go back and just undo all the work I had just done until I got to the point when I accidentally made that black mark, who knows how long ago, and start over. Whoops. So now it is time to test my seamless pattern if I think I'm finished. So first I get rid of the background color so it's transparent, copy the canvas with my entire pattern on it, and I go ahead and create a new square canvas. Of course I change my background color again because I need it to be that nice yellow. I paste my pattern on there, and this time using my magnetics and snapping tools, I go ahead and shrink the pattern down to 1/4 of its original size, and it just snaps right into place. Then I can duplicate that layer and move it over to the side, and I can do that 2 more times so that I have 4 versions of my little pattern, and I can check to make sure that it looks the way I want it to look, that it's perfectly seamless and beautiful, and I can see whether I want to make any changes. And that is how I make my seamless patterns in Procreate. Thank you so much for watching, and let me know if this was helpful to you or if you have any questions in the comments.